Hi everybody, welcome back. This is how to do the cupcake that we talked about before. You can go back to the video that I loaded if you don't want to draw out the cupcake and do the transfer method. I have a video just totally on the transfer method. Don't forget, you can go into your haikus and you can download these two sketches. We did our bird, and that should be getting finished up this week. And now we're starting on the cupcake. And one of the reasons we're doing the cupcake is just because I want to show you some fun methods. I want to show you how you can do this painting using a very limited palette. With just 3 colors. Maybe we might scooch in a little bit, one more, but yeah, we're going to try to keep it down to 3 colors, so a limited palette. And we're going to learn a lot because we're using a white cupcake wrapper, and we have this white whipped cream, and it's just going to lend itself really well to our painting. So I already have mine sketched out. You can do your transfer method if you don't want to sketch it out. I have my paint colors here. I'm using basically the magenta that we've talked about in the past. So I've got the magenta. I've got the phthalo blue or the cyan blue that you guys have. And then I've got a yellow. My yellow is a little different than your guys' yellow. I'm trying to think about your guys' yellow. With the Lucas, you could use either yellow, really, but we're using this to get our mixing going. We're mixing our colors. So here we go. We're gonna get started. So the first thing, once you've got this lightly sketched out for you, and hopefully you guys can kind of at least see the sketch a bit. What you're going to do from there is we're going to wet it down and put in some of the colors. Actually, I'm not even going to wet this down first. I'm going to lay in some base colors, and then we'll do some wetting. So first of all, I'm going to get my yellow and put some of it down on my board. My board is just a binder that we've used before in class to attach our watercolors to. I cut up binders and I use them to attach. So I've got 1/2 of the binder right here that my drawing is resting on. This is not one we have to tape down. So if you want to tape it down, you can. If you want to leave it, you can leave it, because we're not covering the entire paper with a wash today, so you don't have to tape it down. And this is just the other half of the binder. So you can kind of see there's like a pocket edge here. And lift it up and lift my paints up. Anyway, so that's what I'm using as my thing. So I'm getting some of my paints wet. So things you want to make sure you already have on hand. You want to have your spray bottle, so you can spray down your colors. You want to have 2 glasses of water if possible. So you can see I have my 2 cups here. You want to have your sponge for wiping your brush off on, or a towel, an old rag towel that you don't mind getting dirty. And now I got to realign. So I'm going to try to realign this up so you guys can see everything. All right. Okay, so here we go. Back to this. I'm going to lay in this yellow cake section here, and I'm only going to do it just here at the top. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to just go slowly and make sure your brush has a good point. The size brushes I'm using today, I have a size 8 and a size, mine's a size 4, but it comes to an insane tip because it's kind of an expensive brush. If you have some of our brushes from class, I would go with a size 2 if possible, but those brushes are pretty good too. You'll notice every once in a while I pull them out still, just because they're good brushes. Just because something is a bargain doesn't mean it's not good. It is. So I'm just laying down some yellow here. And it is pretty bright, right? And I'm taking care as I go through each little rivet from the cupcake. And I'm moving my yellow along. This is the actual yellow I'm using is a nickel azo yellow. It's my favorite yellow. But you can use either of your yellows. You can pick which yellow you want to use. Alright, so I've got that yellow in. Now what I want to do is I am going to wet it a little bit. And I'm going to, since I'm using yellow right now anyway, I'm going to go lay in, because what happens on a lot of times on a cupcake, when you have like a white wrapper or a thin wrapper, you start to see the baked cupcake in there. So I'm actually going to clean off my brush, get it a little wet, and I'm actually going to come in here across the bottom. Now I'm not going to get this very bottom section wet. I'm only wetting up like some of it. I'm not doing the whole thing. So I would say we're not going all the way up to halfway, just under that. And just make sure it's wet. And then I'm leaving a nice thin ribbon on the bottom that's dry, because I want to leave that white, because it's kind of just the way it works out when you're looking at cupcakes. If you look at the actual photos, that would be good. So now that I've got this sufficiently wet, I might go up on the lines for the ribs a little bit, just so that as I lay in the yellow, it'll kind of sink in. Now here's my first mix. I've already got some yellow on my palette. I'm going to grab the tiniest little bit of my quinacridone red over here and just add a little bit to warm it up, just to give it a warm cakey color, because once it's baked it gets deeper and warmer. So you see how that's a little warmer now. And now I'm paying attention to where my rivets are, and that's what I mean, the pleats for the cupcake. And I'm just kind of coming down where those are, a line down, and then I let it, the color just kind of pools. And it'll continue to just kind of dry and pool like that. And it won't go down to that very bottom layer because I didn't get that wet. So that's the nice thing about pre-wetting. So now I've kind of got this cakey layer. I'll lift that up so you can kind of see better. You can see that this bottom section right here is still white. I want to leave that white for a reason. You'll see. Alright, now you leave that alone. So I'm going to wash off my brush. And now that I've got this kind of orangey, more orangey warm red that I've mixed up using some of my magenta into the yellow, I'm actually going to come across this top here again, but really close to where the whipped cream is. So I'm not touching the whipped cream yet, I'm just starting to warm this up, this top section, and give it more of a golden tone. If yours gets too watered down, then go back and remix and add more pigment, okay? And again, I'm not going into my whipped cream. I'm leaving that alone. And I left some of the edges lighter, so as it gets closer to where the cake batter comes out to the pleats, I left that lighter and still bright yellow. Now what I'm going to do now is we've talked about softening the edges before, so I'm going to take my brush, I've cleaned it off, I blotted it on the sponge, and I'm just going to come along this edge and soften the edge up a little bit so there's not a harsh line when it dries. Okay? Just helps that be a nice fade. Wash your brush off again, flat it, leave it alone. Let's see, and now basically we would make sure that both of these things completely dry, and then we will start in on another section, because while these are wet I can't go up and start my whipped cream. If I did that I would kind of mess it up. Actually, you know what we could do is let's use our yellow. We'll lay in our first little sections of yellow to our whipped cream. So let's get a really watered down yellow mixed up over here. So I just added a lot of water to it. Okay, and then I am just gonna go in up here. I'm gonna add in a little bit of that yellow tone. It warms up the whipped cream. I'm just gonna add in some around these, close to these edges, but I'm not gonna touch that edge that actually comes up to the cake because that's still wet. So I will come in, got a little hair, come in along here, right, and very carefully add this in. Come up along the side here with my very light yellow. And then I'm not going to touch this bottom edge, just like I left part of this white on that bottom edge. I'm going to do that same thing here. So I'm going to put in like a reverse L shape over here on this side. And a little bit maybe right in here with a little shape. Again, I'm not touching the cake section because I don't want those to bleed together. It's a little bit different tone. And there we go. Alright. The last thing we can do using our yellow, and then we'll go to the drying, is actually one of the things I like to do with leaves is I like to, with actually a lot of things, I do this with people too. I could show you a portrait photo that I took pictures during different stages, but I wanted to give her skin more of a luminous quality. She's an African American woman, and what I did is I actually started the entire painting out for her in yellow. And I like to do that with fruit. I like to do that with colored pencils. And so depending on the tones of that person's skin or the object, and we did that a little bit with the apples we painted, is starting out with a yellow kind of makes things glow. It gives it a luminous quality. So let's paint very carefully our leaf in yellow. And we could even do not the entire raspberry, but a little bit of the raspberries yellow. Okay. And it'll just brighten up the red when the red hits it. All right, cool. Here we go. We will take a minute. I'm going to dry it. You guys can grab a blow dryer, blow dry it with a blow dryer, or you can walk away, take a little bit of a break, go get a snack or eat a meal with the family, do some homework, whatever it is you guys need to do. So we'll come back when this is dry. All right, everybody, I'm back. It's nice and dry. I went and got myself something to eat. And now what we're going to do is I grabbed my magenta. I've watered it down over here on my palette because we're going to continue to do wet on dry. I'm leaving this dry. And I'm going to come in now with my magenta color. And so I've watered it down so I can build up layers slowly. Also, it's glazing. So if you guys remember on our first project where we taped off different windows in sections, our glazing section was when we did like 3 or 4 yellow stripes, and then we waited for that to dry, and then we glazed over it with some red stripes, let that dry, glazed over again with blue, and it kind of came out looking plaid. And the glazing is just going in wet on dry and translucent layers to build up colors and depth and stuff like that. And so what we're going to do is be working on top down. We're going to start with our first layer of the red or the magenta on the raspberry. We're going to lay in some color. I'll grab the actual one. So we're going to start here with the first layer, so this light layer that we can see of the red. We're going to do some rosy watered down areas in here on our whipped cream to help give it depth and shadow. And then we're going to come in and we're going to add some more rosy color along in that bottom section, not the very bottom, but this section where the cake batter kind of cooks into the wrapper, as well as we're going to do some very careful lines. So you want your number 2 or your most pointed, best pointer edged brush. Okay, so we're going here, 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 working our way down. Okay, so I've got my wash all set, and I'm just going to start in on the raspberry. And this is a nice thing because you can check whether or not you've got your color where you want it. So sorry, I got an itch in my throat. So for here, because the raspberry is literally going to be a deep red raspberry, I'm going to go really slow when I get up to the edges that are near the whipped cream. But I deepened it up just a little bit. I went back and got a little bit more pigment. But I'm going to keep it definitely watered down when I'm getting down into this whipped cream. So grab some water, pull off a watered down section here. And now I'll do my glazing. of the areas of the whipped cream. So I'm going to bring in my rod up here along this edge. And it's a nice little light rosy color. And then I talked to you about this last time when we were doing the cake. But I'm going to immediately wash off my brush, damp it off on the sponge, and then I'm going to soften the edge. So I'm coming along the edge that I just had because I don't want a rough edge to this. So I'm softening it. And again, another thing you guys can always do is if you get something a little too deep or dark, you have your handy dandy tissue or a rag, and you can kind of do a little bit of a blot. So again, I'm going to go back in. My next area, I'm going to add some reddish tone in here. And I'm going for some random shapes. And then I want to line this little, there's a little bit of a whipped cream edge here. So I'm just going to bring that in. And let's see where else. A little bit in here on the edge. A little bit in here. And I'm kind of doing some random shapes to my whipped cream. Okay. I'm going to wash my brush off. Blot it off. And I'm going to soften some of this. Like this edge right here, I want to soften that. So there's more of a light shadow. Not quite so dark. Blot that brush off after you wash it off. There we go. It's nice and soft. And then right here on this edge shadow I laid in, I'm going to soften that. And I'm going to do a little bit of softening right here. This is also a good way of washing your brush off and blotting it. It's also a really good way to control how light or dark something is. So if you feel like you might have gotten something a little too deep of a color, again, you're just like a tissue or a cloth, your brush will suck up some of that color and that paint and soften the edge. Super handy. Alright, so I've got some of that. I've left some of the areas white still. If I want, I could blot. Alright, so I'm done with my whipped cream, with my rosy whipped cream areas. If you want to look at them up closer, you can see little areas. Alright, now I'm going to come in and I'm going to be really careful using that watered down red, but I want to wipe some of the water off of my brush, so either on the edge of your palette or I'm just dragging it across here and it relieves some of the water out. But I just want to be careful. So what I want to do now with these edges is actually I want to leave, like, if we look at this, I'll look at the real one. If we look at this, the edges that catch the light are the ones that pop out towards us. And then the deepest shadows occur on the inset. So if you look right here, it's like this goes in and this comes out. So the part that comes out, the fold that comes out, is where it's going to stay white or the lightest color. And the fold that goes in towards the cupcake is where it's going to be darker. So in towards the cupcake is where we're going to put our lines. Alright, so I'm just going to go really slow and careful. You can turn your picture if you need to. It's up to you how you want it to be, but it helps. And then I'm going to find where my, like, so right here is an out. So I want to do my in line. And you don't have to go all the way up to the top. Actually, I'd rather not. I'd like to stop a little short. I keep forgetting that and going all the way to the top. So you can blot that. These don't have to be just right. I'm just going to take this one down a little further. And they kind of curve in and then back out a little bit. It's just the way the cake batter seems to settle in. making sure I'm getting a fold that's going in, not a fold that's going out. And it will probably look kind of silly at first and maybe not look fabulous. It is okay, because we're building this up in layers. Again, we are in a glazing process. Now this one, because this fold comes out, I can't actually see into that one or this one over here. So now what I'm going to do is, using that very watered down red, I'm just going to add in a little bit of a shadow to this bottom edge, but I'm leaving that white space again. So just where that cake batter has kind of creeped in, I'm adding in a little bit more shading with that rosy watered down red. Okay. And I'm not going to have to soften these lines. So now what you would do is we would actually let this dry. So now you want to let the rose color dry, and then we're going to come in and do our next glazing with using our blue. Okay. All right, continuing on, once you have that nice and dry, I'm going to mix up some watery blue down here. I gotta thin it out because I want to do a light glaze again. So I'm just going to come bring a little section over to this side with more water. All right, this is your cyan, or any primary blue will work. If you guys have a different primary blue, depending on what palettes and colors you have, go for it. Okay, so now we're going to come in and we're going to add in some deeper shadowed layers. And coming in on our, we're going to not go to the leaf yet because we'll get yellow out again and mix up a green color to go up there. But I want to do some of our shadows on our whipped cream with the blue. And we're going to come in again on our rivets, adding a deeper line so you can kind of see on the actual painting. We've got some blue in here and here. It kind of completes out these shadows we've been adding. And then we're going to come in and I'm going to do these little pockets here. They help give the shadow and the appearance of the folds, the kind of accordion folds that we have on our cupcake wrapper. And then again, on the inside where the fold goes in towards the cupcake, we are going to add in the blue over atop the red. Okay, so starting up at the top with my extra watery blue, and I'm going to wipe off some of that water because I don't want to make puddles in my whipped cream. I am just going to come in and in a few areas just kind of glaze in some blue, and the blue is going to come in as the deepest shadow. And because this is now dry, I can also kind of come in on this bottom edge with the blue. Now I'm not lining the whole bottom edge. Nope. Just little sections. And it's kind of like when we did with the pink and the yellow. We're just picking a few areas to bring in the blue. And this little ridge here, I'm going to add in a little, I'm going really detailed, so you're using your number 2 or a smaller brush just to keep it really tight and detailed. And your blue can go over some of your pinks and your yellows. Because you're glazing, it shouldn't turn brown. You're doing a very light wash. Now, just like before, I'm going to wash my brush off, blot it off so it's not too wet, and then I'm going to soften some of these areas up a little bit and let them have a nice soft blend. And if need be, you can blot to kind of lighten it up, or just use your brush. And I'm going to add, sometimes there's little air pockets that show up in our whipped cream, so I'm just going to add a little few dots and shapes. So I'll get that closer so you can see those. All right. And I'm going to deepen up this area again. That's close to the cake. Because I am just maybe going to have a little bit of a deeper shadow on one side. All right. Now I am going to go over here to my watered down blue again, but I need to get some of that water off. I don't want it too wet so that I can get really fine detailed on these ridges. So I'm paying close attention to trying to get that center line in, and I'm going to go right over the red. So as you go over the red section, the neat thing here is that it kind of turns into a really lovely like periwinkle or kind of purpley color. And the lovely thing about shadows in real life is oftentimes shadows have many colors. A lot of people, when they want to paint a shadow, they just paint it black. And the more you get into color theory, you learn that shadows have tons of colors. And actually, paint makers, because so many artists will mix up different colors to achieve those more natural, realistic colors and shadows, paint makers started making paints that were these really creative mixes. But it was mainly because they were just, you know, you're always trying to bring in new product. And so they wanted to, so they created, like, there's a paint called Moonglow. I don't own it, but a friend of mine does, from Daniel Smith, and a lot of people love that for shadows. But it's actually a combination of a green, a red, and what's the last one? I'm trying to remember the actual names my friend gave me, because she actually mixes it up on her own. And that's the other thing, is you can look at paints, and the higher quality they are, they'll have numbers and letters on them. And those are telling you what the actual ingredients, like what minerals, what things was it using. I'm going to pause for just a second because the FedEx guy is here. And so I think my dogs are about to go crazy. All right. So I'm just finishing out that blue shadowed edge that I was talking to you guys about. And I'm going to, as I come down here, I'm going to add in just a few little areas of shadow, just like we did with the red, but a little less, because I still really want to be able to tell that it's the cake. Okay, so I'm rinsing off my brush. I want to lighten these up a little bit. Wash the brush off. It's a slow build with your cupcake, but it's worth it in the end. Okay, it should look kind of rainbowy right now because you've got just 3 colors that we're going to continue to layer and create deeper tones with. So right now it should be fairly rainbow looking. You should see some pinks and blues and yellows. Now what I would say is we don't really have any, you shouldn't have any. Actually, let's go in with a little blue up on your raspberry, just towards the bottom edge of your raspberry. So the part that touches the whipped cream. Okay. And the reason for this is because it helps create, again, the shadow. And then when you add in, as we build up the red, now as I'm doing this, I'm going to explain it in a minute, but I'm going to start mimicking raspberries. So if you can remember, raspberries are made up of tiny little berry cells, like little circles that are all connected. And so what I'm going to do, because I want it to be a deeply ripe red raspberry, is I'm going to just kind of mimic these round structures a little bit. So I'll hold it closer in just a second. But I'm just going to give a few little rounded shapes in there with the blue. Okay? And I want this to be the more shadowed side, so that's why you're going to see more blue on this side than the other. Alright? So we're good with our blue now. Once again, we let this dry.